千里之行，始于足下。A journey of 1,000 miles begins beneath the feet. We now gather in the Tao to travel the journey together. Welcome to Tao Talks with Derek Lin, where we take a deep dive into the Tao Te Ching by Lao Tzu. I would like to extend a warm welcome to you. Thank you for joining us. I would like to invite you to center your thoughts and direct your attention to this moment in time, to the here and now, to be fully present and mindfully aware as we all ready ourselves for this sacred process in the Tao with one another. Now, without further ado, let's continue with Tao Te Ching 22. Chapter 22, Hold to the Oneness. As we discussed previously, this title can also be accurately translated as Embrace Oneness. To hold on to the oneness of the Tao is to embrace it. And oneness, as we discussed previously, refers to the Tao itself. Or it can also be the Tao within us. And the two, although spoken from a different perspective, they are one and the same. So to embrace this oneness, what exactly does Lao Tzu say about this process? We began previously with a look at the chapter overall. It's medium in length, 17 lines, and when we did the sectional analysis, we were able to see within it the hidden structure of 3 sections. And when it's marked off by the sectional lines, it seems obvious. Section 1 is a collection of 6 lines, and the length of each line is 3 characters each. This is consistent all the way through until line 7, when it changes to a different form. So from line 7 down to line 12, we have another section. The bottom half of that, the last 4 lines of that, have a similar structure, where 3 out of the 4 lines all contain 5 characters, as you can see. And those characters have a repetition. So the only one out of the usual repetitive 5 characters will be line 11 with 1 extra character there. Then we have a final section, which is about non-contention. Last time, we were almost done with the first section. So here is a quick recap on what we discussed. We began with the first 2 lines of this chapter. Yield and remain whole. Bend and remain straight. As we have talked about, both yielding and bending are part of what Lao Tzu points to as the soft approach to life. And as he describes elsewhere in the Tao Te Ching, the soft overcomes hard. The soft approach to life is the relatively uncommon approach in real life. What we usually see is that people tend to go at everything with the opposite approach, the hard approach. That is, stubborn, no yielding, no flexibility, no compromise. Like, I am not going to budge. You move. You move aside, because I won't. So the uncommon approach of soft is the better approach. This chapter explains why. One quick note before we continue. The very first line shows up again at the end of this chapter, where Lao Tzu specifically says it is a teaching from the ancient masters. This is important to note that Lao Tzu is not the originator of the concepts expressed here. These are teachings passed down through the generations, and now he is doing his part in passing it down to us. Then we previously also moved on to the next concept, which is about the Tao of humility. Be low and become filled. Be worn out and become renewed. These lines tell us we also need the humble approach to complement the flexible approach. It is an open and receptive attitude, ready to be filled, which means ready to learn something new. It is also a utilitarian attitude, and what I mean by that is it is to waste nothing in using something, whether that something is a tool, a resource, or a lesson in the Tao. That way, when that something is fully utilized, used up, or worn out, you are ready to renew it. This idea applies physically, mentally, and spiritually. Therefore, when we say renewal, we can mean an upgrade, like a tool, an advanced concept, perhaps the Tao, or the next level in general. Continuing with the recap, this slide is where we left off previously. As I noted, the first 6 lines are subdivided into 3 parts of 2 lines each. We have already talked about yielding and humility, represented by lines 1 and 2, 3 and 4, respectively. Now we move on to the third part, which is about possessions, either having little or having too much. And what we did previously was that we talked through this slide to know that in the Tao, having little can be positive. The metaphor was that when your teacup is low on tea or empty, you pour fresh hot tea into it. The general idea applies to every aspect of our lives. Therefore, whenever there is some sort of decrease in one aspect of life, it is followed by some sort of increase, perhaps in a different area of life. The easy way to think about it is that when you and I reduce physical clutter in our environment, we end up freeing up a lot of mental bandwidth. We've all had the experience of being in a place that is immaculate, well organized, and clean, and we're able to be more productive, think more clearly in a setting like that. When we sit down to concentrate on a subject in this environment, which is decluttered and clear of all the things that can distract us. Now, having recapped this part, we are ready to proceed beyond this point and go into line 6 of the first 6 lines. Line 6 says, have much and be confused. So that is a straightforward translation of the 3 characters, where the first character is having more, having too much. It may not be a good thing in the Tao. Having less can be a positive thing, so conversely, having more, having excess may be a negative thing. For instance, having more options, too many options, can lead to negative outcomes. Outcomes such as, Lao Tzu points out, confusion. And the example that I would cite is from popular entertainment, what you and I experience all the time, and often heard complaint in our world today is that there are hundreds of channels on cable television, but nothing to watch. What we mean is, of course, nothing worthwhile, nothing interesting, nothing good to watch. In our increasingly connected world, with so many streaming options, that is added to the number of options by the day, all of our options together, they multiply even more. We may be facing not hundreds of channels, but thousands of options. And we're still ending up with the same old, still the complaint. So many things available to us, nothing interesting, worthwhile to watch. Another possible factor of having too many options leading to negativity is the fear of missing out, the pressure of making the right choice. When you have so many choices in front of you and you need to pick one of so many, what people usually think of is that, well, with so many possibilities, what if what I pick is not the right choice or the best choice? Imagine going into a restaurant. The waiter hands you a huge menu. You see numerous options, and every entree in the menu has a full-color photo to entice you, to show you how good, how delicious it looks. So right away, you don't know which one of the many entrees to pick. So what do most of us do? Well, some people will ask the waiter, so which ones out of all these options are the popular dishes? And the waiter, of course, can point to one of them or some of them or ask you questions like, what do you like? This kind of food or that kind of food? You can still end up with many options. Plus, the ones not pointed out by the waiter, they can look really good too with the color photos. You know that you can only eat so much. What if you choose something and there is something else that is better? This is the fear of missing out. And in recent years, people have abbreviated fear of missing out as the FOMO, which just tells you that it's becoming rather common. In our world, people are facing numerous options, not just with entertainment, not just going to a restaurant, but in an ever-increasing number of areas in life. So what else can we delve into with this idea from Lao Tzu? Decision paralysis. People struggle to choose, or psychologically may even avoid choosing. This brings me to mind an example from real life. I have friends, a couple of friends in particular, who have a little boy. He loves to play with a toy car. He used to spend all his time with his one toy car. He took it with him everywhere. So his parents, my friends, asked him about it. He would say all the adventures he was having, he was imagining himself driving the little car, going on all these different adventures, these imaginary settings. Not only was he having fun, but it was also a great way for him to exercise his imagination. When my friends saw how much he loved it, they decided to buy him a present, a box of Hot Wheels toy cars for his upcoming birthday. Hot Wheels, I think many of us know, it comes in a box with many cars. This particular Hot Wheels box had 50 toy cars. When the birthday came and the little boy unwrapped his present, he was overwhelmed with joy. But after a while, my friends noticed he was not spending time with them, playing with them, taking them out on his little adventures. So they asked him, "Hey, aren't those your favorite toys? How come you are not spending time with them or playing with them?" The little boy said, "There are so many cars. I love them all, but I don't know which one to play with." He had too many choices. This was an example of decision paralysis. So this example and many others is why Lao Tzu says, have much and be confused. So with the last part, we now have a way to provide a mini summary of the concepts and also talk about how they connect to other verses in the Tao Te Ching. Starting with the first concept, less is more. Have little and receive. Now, we have seen this is another way to talk about humility. It is the echo of line 3, be low and become filled. Another way to talk about it, and this one from Tao Te Ching 48, the idea is expressed differently. When you pursue the Tao, the first line says, pursue knowledge, daily gain, and the second line says, pursue Tao, daily loss. So when you pursue the Tao, there's daily decrease. The loss is, for instance, decreasing or reducing your egocentric preconceptions. So having less arrogance, you are then able to receive the wisdom of the Tao. And that takes us back to the empty teacup, symbolized by receiving fresh hot tea poured into it. The other part of this section, have much and be confused. This is also echoed in other passages of the Tao Te Ching. Specifically, the one that I want to point to your attention is from Tao Te Ching 9. It says, "Gold and jade fill up the room. No one is able to protect them." So, again, a slightly different way to express the concept, but in general, the more things you accumulate, the more complex and confusing everything becomes. In terms of material acquisitions, having a lot just means having to guard them against loss or theft, having to protect them against damage or destruction. So in this world of ours, our biggest problems usually come from having excess, having too much, rather than having too little. As an example, our leading cause of death is cardiovascular disease. That's caused by overindulgence, not starvation. All these things that people fear, the heart attack, strokes, they're all associated with indulging in excess. So too much is not just confusing, it can also be deadly. Of course, to the conventional mind, more materialism is better. More profits and wealth mean more luxuries, more toys. Unfortunately, excess in that perspective invariably will lead to disorientation, even spiritual emptiness. This is like when you feel, wow, all that time spent in acquisition, acquiring more and more, what's it all for? What's the point of it? So for all of those reasons, that is why Lao Tzu says, have little and receive, have much and be confused. Now we can move on to the beginning part of the next section. As the middle part of this particular chapter, this is the most important section. It is the main part. Line 7 says, therefore, the sages hold to the One. The One serves as the chapter title, and that underlines the significance of oneness. It also connects this chapter to the previous chapter in a logical sequence. So before we delve into the idea of oneness or unity of the Tao, let me just describe the logical sequence from chapter 21 to 22. At the end of 21, the previous chapter, Lao Tzu writes, how do I know the nature of the source? And then he writes, with this. As we discussed previously, this is the oneness of the Tao. encompassing this place, this moment, this direction, this path. So when we see that, it is also easy to see why the sages would hold on to the one. And we can further expand on that in many different directions. We can say, think of the one as the oneness you feel in this moment, in the present moment, in your present moment mindful awareness. That is the connection that you feel to the Tao in the here and now. You can also think of the one as the one important thing you must focus on today, or daily, the most important thing to focus on every day. And we have the expression for that for people who are, working on their secular career, focusing on their secular profession, that the one thing is they want to, quote unquote, keep your eyes on the prize, keep your eyes on the goal, to not lose that focus, because it is the one thing. It can be, in terms of your lifetime, the most important thing, whatever that is for you, your sacred task for your life, your mission in this lifetime, the reason why you are here. So the concept of the one goes very deep. And one last thing I want to point out, the one can be the unity of mind, like right now, this moment, as we gather together in the Tao. So back in 1937, a writer by the name of Napoleon Hill wrote many popular books. One thing he wrote about, he called the mastermind. Napoleon Hill described the mastermind as what naturally occurs when two or more people come together in a spirit of harmony to accomplish a particular goal, to solve a particular problem. The mastermind embodies synergy, that when two or more people come together, the combined power of the group is always greater than the sum of individual minds. That same thing is happening here, right now. You and I gathering together in the Tao, whatever mastermind is the synthesis of our cognitive processes is emergent, and it is wiser than you or me. Continuing on, the oneness is also the unity of purpose in the Tao. The purpose can be expressed as embracing the cultivation of the Tao without straying from the path, or embracing the sharing of the Tao without straying from the path. And better yet, both. Both cultivate the Tao and share the Tao. So the consistent, unified mission of all the ancient sages, as far as sharing the Tao, is to pass it on. All of them, without exception, were steadfast, consistent in embracing this oneness, the cultivation of it, the sharing of it. So Lao Tzu touched on this in 道德经 10. In holding the soul and embracing oneness, can one be steadfast without straying? And this is all speaking to the process of learning about the Tao, then progressing into the attainment of mastery, then sharing your understanding with others so that you and the others can traverse the path together. Sort of like what we are doing now. So since ancient times, regardless of any differences in opinion, all the sages from the different eras, different generations, different dynasties, they agree on this one point. It is the ancient legacy that you and I, as Tao cultivators, we have inherited this. It therefore becomes our mission as well to continue the tradition, to pass the Tao onto others. There is, of course, more. The oneness can also be understood as the central emptiness of the Tao. This is the void that enables the functionality of everything in existence. This is the hub of all things. It can be seen in 道德经 11 through the chariot metaphor. 30 spokes join in one hub. In its emptiness, there is the function of a vehicle. So when we talk about this, applying this to reality and existence, everything in existence is conceptually joined in the oneness of the Tao. As I said, it is the hub, the central hub of all things. Its emptiness gives functionality to the vehicle known as reality, the one center in life. So by holding on to this oneness, when you and I hold on to this oneness, the many spokes of our lives can function. And the vehicle of our lives can move forward. And let's explore oneness in yet another dimension. The sages regard oneness as the ultimate in the world. Let me say this in a different way so that it is less abstract. The oneness of the Tao is literally the master key to everything. Let me talk about the way that Lao Tzu expresses it. It is most evident in 道德经 39. It says, those that attained oneness since ancient times. The sky attained oneness and thus clarity. The earth attained oneness and thus tranquility. The gods attained oneness and thus divinity. The valley attained oneness and thus abundance. The myriad things attained oneness and thus life. The rulers attained oneness and became the world's standard. Now, let me talk about the same thing from a different angle. This oneness, think of it as the one change that you have seen, that you have experienced, that for you makes all the differences in the world. The one thought that you've had that changes you at your most fundamental level. If you look back, think back on your life, you're going to realize you've experienced those singular moments when one thought determined the direction of your destiny. Think about the one piece that completes a jigsaw puzzle. Extend that to think about the one metaphoric piece that completes the puzzle of life. And finally, think about the one element that catalyzes your own spiritual transformation. And then pulling all of those together as one. So that there is the master key for your life. Now, we also have to talk about oneness as the source, the singularity, the singular source of creation, the point of origin for everything in existence. The ancient sages thought about this through reasoning. They looked at everything, everybody, the myriad things, the living things, and they reasoned that everything traces back. Every effect has some sort of cause. And the cause itself is an effect that has a previous cause as well. So then, in reasoning to the ultimate extent, we can see what Lao Tzu says in Tao Te Ching 42. Tao produces one. One produces two. Two produce three. Three produce myriad things. So, in this perspective, oneness is the origin of the myriad things ultimately. So, with all these different layers of meaning, all these different facets of oneness, we go to line 8. So line 8 says, as an example for the world, and the complete thoughts is that the sages hold to the one, what we have just discussed, over multiple slides. They hold to the one as an example for the world. They set an example when Lao Tzu writes 天下, the world, he's referring to everyone. So what the sages have set is an example to follow, a standard for the entire world. So when we talk about this basic idea of Tao cultivation, since the beginning, it has always been about application. And in that application, our primary focus is the Tao, not the sages. We emulate what the sages say and do to get closer to the Tao, to approach the Tao. So in terms of application, this is basically meaning we apply what we can understand about life. And in the Tao, this is Daoli, the reasoning of the Tao. We apply what we understand to what we can do. So the complete thought is that apply what you and I can understand about life to what you and I can do in life. So here, the last character is translated as example. It can also be translated as standard. Without the accuracy of this translation, it is entirely possible for Western students of the Tao to feel confused. They may say, the Tao is just the Tao. There's no applying the Tao. How do you apply a path? It doesn't make any sense. This is what can happen when the words of Lao Tzu get distorted. Some end up only contemplating the abstract emptiness of the Tao, the doing nothing of Wu Wei, and therefore are not able to understand how one would quote-unquote use the Tao in daily activities. Here in this chapter, this passage, we can see Lao Tzu explicitly saying that the Tao set the example, the standard for the world, for everybody, including all of us. By seeing how the sages lived their lives, how they spoke, how they conducted themselves, we can all get very clear ideas on how to live our lives, what we should say, what we should do with one another. That is what we mean by applying the Tao to life. Now, of course, we want to be careful in noting that the sages are human beings just like us. They are not deities. Their words point to the Tao like a finger pointing to the moon. It is the same with their actions. Their actions also point to the Tao. And this is why we have the metaphor that we often repeat, a finger pointing at the moon. It bears repeating that we should be careful to not mistake the finger for the moon. We want to follow their example, keeping the overall goal in mind. We're trying to become more Tao-like in all of our words and actions. We're trying to do what we can with what we know and understand more in order to return to our true nature. Ultimately, to be one with the Tao. Just like when we say, do not mistake the finger for the moon, we also do not mistake the sages for the Tao. Not their words, not their actions, not them as individuals. So beyond this slide, we're about to get into the 4 primary principles when the sages set a standard or an example for all to follow. We're about to talk about the 4 primary principles, which are, to summarize, no flaunting oneself, no presuming oneself, no praising oneself, and no boasting oneself. Let us explore them in detail, one by one. Line 9. Without flaunting themselves, and so are seen clearly. First, let's break down the 5 characters. The first character is the character for no, 不, one of the most commonly used characters. The second character is the character for self. The third character is a character for seeing. There is an additional nuance with this character, which we will talk about momentarily. The fourth character is the character for therefore. Then the last character is clear, sometimes mistranslated as bright. So let me zoom in on the middle character, the third one. In modern Mandarin, it just means to see something. That's it. In ancient Chinese, in this particular context, it had a different meaning, to be seen. So in that usage, it was expressed transitioning from active voice to passive voice. Active voice, to see something. Passive voice, to be seen by others. In the active sense, if we were to apply the active meaning, it would be detachment from one's own point of view, like wanting other people to see it your way. You want to be detached from that. So in other words, not be fixated on what one can see out of the realization that one's own perspective can be limited. And therefore, one has the clarity to incorporate the perspectives from other people for a more complete picture. The passive sense, it means detachment from being seen by other people. So in other words, not be bound by external validation. And this is because for the sages, their focus is on the Tao, not on social approval. So sages do not showcase themselves. Ironically, it is because of that, because that they are different from just about everybody else who want to be seen, who want to be highly visible. The sages are seen clearly for being distinguished. Now, a comment on human nature. This is true for all of us. It is human nature to perceive others more clearly than oneself. We all have clear perceptions or better perceptions of how other people are, but sometimes, oftentimes, we're blind to our own faults. Because of the way this works, in the course of time, everybody will be seen clearly by others sooner or later. It becomes clear that there are those who showcase themselves and the wise ones, like the sages, who do not showcase themselves. The truth eventually will come out and become obvious to everybody. The ones who flaunt, they presented a facade, this image that they have crafted. Because of that, they are not being themselves. What they show is a veneer. They are not authentic. They may temporarily impress other people, but in time, their true colors will be revealed. The lack of authenticity will be exposed. So eventually, they too will be seen clearly for who they really are. And it is not a good look. Next line, without presuming themselves, and so are distinguished. So in the same way, we'll break down the 5 characters. Because of the repeating characters, they're mostly the same. The difference would be in the middle character and the last character. So again, we have the characters for not, the character for self. The middle character is correct, like certitude. The fourth character is therefore, thus. And then the last character is distinguished. Sages do not presume they must always be correct in all things. They have no presumptions of correctness to push onto other people. The sages are open to alternative views and multiple perspectives, not just their own. They utilize all the perspectives available to them to make their own views stronger and more inclusive, more reflective of the objective truth. And this is why when something happens and there are different interpretations from different people as to what occurred, they remain open to them. And this continues to be the case even when they know they have developed a better grasp of the situation than others. And this is exactly as we have seen last time when we talked about the aggressive approach, like, look, I know I'm right, slamming tables and so forth, and the Tao approach of having genuine insights on the truth, but then make no attempts to dominate the discussion with other people. This is distinguished because it is different. It is different from what many people do. And non-presumption, I think you can see it is linked to humility. It is also linked to non-contention. And let me just point out, this line 10, and the previous line 9, they form a pair. They both speak to the internal manifestation of arrogance versus humility. So both flaunting and presuming are internal manifestations of arrogance. To refrain from doing that are internal manifestations of humility, and we'll talk more on this in just a moment when we sum up this part of the chapter. Continuing on. Line 11. Without praising themselves, and so have merit. So we'll break down the characters again, where most of the characters are the same. Not, self, these are the same. The middle character is praise. Then we have the same therefore character in the fourth position. Now we have the last two characters instead of just the one character like the other three lines in this group. And they are simply has or have and then merit. So altogether, sages do not self-praise. They do not praise themselves. They do not put themselves on a pedestal. So as I mentioned, they focus on the Tao. Their focus is on the right, doing the right thing. They don't crave external approval, society's validation of them. Those are not important to the sages. They are also aware that self-praise will usually have the opposite effect. What I mean is, you end up with negative opinions from others, not positive opinions, not favorable thoughts as you may prefer. when you praise yourself, you're seen in that negative light. So because of that, they end up praised by others for having virtuous merit. Because praise from other people carry much more weight and credibility than self-praise. I think we all know that. And this reminds me, 道德经 chapter 9, toward the end of it, we see the following lines. It says, when achievement is completed, fame is attained, withdraw oneself. This is the Tao of heaven. What it means by the end of chapter 9 is depicting this attitude that doing the good work is the important thing. Once it is done, it is time to fade off into the background to move on to the next worthwhile task. There's no sticking around to praise oneself. Line 12. Without boasting about themselves, and so are lasting. When we break down this line, again, we see that most of it is the same. The middle character is boast or brag, and then the last character is lasting. So sages do not boast about their abilities or what they have done, achievements, accomplishments. We know the reverse example. Those who like to boast or brag, they want to draw attention to themselves. But note that whatever attention they get will end up being temporary. The fame that they feel they deserve will usually turn into infamy. And why is that? Because nobody likes someone who brags. The braggarts want to be famous. They end up being infamous. They want to be respected. They end up being ridiculed. So sages are aware. They know they can easily end up with the reverse if they engage in the path of arrogance. Sages also observe the world. They note that heaven and earth do not boast. That will be contrary to the Tao. And that is why they last. Heaven and earth are lasting because they do not exist for themselves. They take after the characteristics of the Tao, and the Tao is eternal. That which aligns with the Tao will last, like heaven and earth, like the sages. That which do not, that which go against the Tao, will soon perish. Now, I want to qualify the statement. The ones who go against the Tao will soon perish. This applies to human beings as well. But let me caution everyone that soon, the expression soon, in this case, is not necessarily according to our human perception of time. What I mean by that is you may be seeing this in your life right now. It may seem as if some vile individuals will never get the karmic consequences they deserve. That is only because karma operates over an eternal time scale. So its time frames will often seem too long from our mortal perspective, with our limited and finite lifespan. The only thing we can really do is to have patience and faith. So back to the Tao, heaven and earth, and the sages, they align and they last. By aligning with the Tao, the sages naturally feel no need to boast. It requires no effort for them to refrain from bragging. In fact, they would not even think about bragging to begin with. This line and the previous line also form a pair. They both speak to the external manifestation of arrogance. Let me depict the internal and the external so you can see what I mean by this complementary dichotomy. So the sages hold to the one. We have seen the example of the sages as the one standard for the world can be expressed in the 4 parts that we have just gone through. 2 of them are internal and the other 2 are external, as I mentioned. Let's start with the internal. So the first one, without flaunting themselves and so are seen clearly, to flaunt oneself is all about arrogant thoughts, plus the contrivance to show off. So it's internal leading to external. It begins with that internal thought, like as an example, a fitness buff wearing a shirt that is obviously too tight. Why? Because, well, look at these arms. Even when an arrogant person says nothing, he may hog the spotlight, assume a higher profile, or both, all for the purpose of being seen. Again, it starts with that internal purpose. They may harbor this internal conviction of certitude, like, I know better. I know more than they do. They know nothing. They are all fools, etc. I alone am the genius among them. This inner presumption prevents one from using the soft approach of the Tao to be flexible, to seek alternative paths to a goal. The thinking goes something like this. I am right. They are wrong. Why should I budge? They should move out of my way. This becomes a self-imposed obstacle that is very easy for other people to see, but very difficult for that person to overcome. So that is the internal. It has to do with the thought that gives rise to flaunting and the thought that leads to presumptuous internal conviction of certitude. Now let's switch our attention to the external manifestations. So the other 2 form the external without praising themselves, without boasting about themselves. These all come from interactions with people. When you praise yourself, you are telling other people about how great you are. It is all about externalizing the ego, expressing that ego through talking about the self. As we often see in real life, this becomes obvious when the arrogant ones engage in that self-praise, that public boasting. It becomes not just obvious, but painfully obvious. However, chances are they, the ones who engage in the boasting and the self-praise, they do not realize it is perceived in that extremely negative light. Far from respecting or revering them, people may find them repulsive instead. The urge to boast and praise oneself, they can go beyond words. It is also possible that the arrogant person will try to get other people to talk about them in a favorable light. So in the yin and yang symbol, what we have in this symbol, to the left part of it, that is the external, visible side. It is the overt. And then on the right-hand side, it is the internal, unseen, the covert side of the complementary duality. So we link the internal to the right side, and we link the external to the left side. So there is a story that illustrates this idea. Once upon a time, in ancient China, there was a Tao teacher who taught a group of students. He was respected by his students, who regarded him as a virtuous master. One day, he was sitting in meditation while 3 of his students stood away from him. They looked at him with admiration and talked among themselves, speaking in whispers. The first student said, "Our master's knowledge is vast, and his insights into the ancient teachings are without equal." "I agree," the second student nodded. "I am amazed by his wisdom." The third student added, "Not only that, but I can also see great depth in his spiritual cultivation." "True," the first student said, "He is always patient and never frantic." They paused for a moment, and their teacher suddenly spoke up. He said, with one eye open to stare at them, he asked them, "Why has none of you mentioned my humility?" The Tao. In this story, we can see that appearance can be deceiving. Someone who appears to be a master may not actually have the qualities of a real master. In Tao Te Ching 30:38, Lao Tzu writes, "High virtue is not virtuous. Therefore, it has virtue. Low virtue never loses virtue. Therefore, it has no virtue." What Lao Tzu is expressing is that the truly virtuous would not think of themselves as virtuous. The truly humble would not think of themselves as humble. To such people, the truly virtuous, truly humble, there is always room for improvement. And this story can apply to our present world situations as well. We do have many people who claim to be masters, who teach spirituality, but the truth about them will be seen in their actions rather than their claims. So, because of all this, Lao Tzu writes, "Therefore, the sages hold to the One as an example for the world. When they embrace the oneness of the Tao, it would not even occur to them to flaunt, to presume, to self-praise, to boast." And that's how you can tell that these are genuine, authentic sages among us. Continuing on. Line 13. Because they do not contend, This line is referencing the sages again. The sages are non-contentious. So I want to start out by focusing on the last two characters there. 不争, 2 characters. The first one is the character for no or not, and the second character is the character for contention, to contend. So when we put them together, they form the Tao principle of non-contention. The aim of this principle is to minimize struggle and strife in one's life. Instead, just like it says in this chapter, it uses yielding and adaptability in practical, everyday situations. Also, it is open to alternate paths to a peaceful resolution. As we talked about last time, a head-on collision or a confrontation may not be absolutely necessary in some sort of a life situation that is contentious. What we have experienced in life is that it teaches us the events we encounter in the life journey. They are often multifaceted. Sometimes we fail to see alternatives, better paths, only because we're fixated on one particular path as the only path. But due to the complexity that is part of life itself, it would be rare if there is absolutely, positively no other way or no better way to resolve everything in a positive, harmonious fashion. So, back to the principle of non-contention, it is open to the stepping back in order to move forward. Taking a step back can open things up. It can provide an opportunity to see things better. Now, oftentimes we see people on both sides of an issue refuse to give an inch. So there's a stalemate and it persists. Now, if someone who has mastered diplomacy and negotiation comes into this issue, that person may urge everyone to consider the question, a simple question of what if? What if we make a certain concession? Would you, the other side, then be willing to match the goodwill with a similar gesture? What if? So, taking a step back to move forward, this is especially effective in our lives when we manage personal relationships. Think about what happens where two friends have a disagreement and it causes a fracture in the friendship. If one of them understands the Tao, takes this chapter to heart, and decides to become a better person by apologizing first, you can just imagine what will happen. The other one will apologize too. No, it was my fault too. The two of them are able to settle their differences in a peaceful and harmonious way. So this is probably one of the most common examples of what can happen when someone takes a step back, apologize first, then because of that is able to move forward, to advance in terms of the restoration of a valuable friendship. So we have explored a lot today And we are just beginning to talk about non-contention, a very important topic. We are getting close to the top of the hour now, so we'll make a jump to the summary for today. And the summary for today includes the summary for part of our discussion last time because we were not able to cover all the contents in the first part of the summary in our last discussion, but we were able to get to all of them this time. In the first part of this chapter, Lao Tzu talks about the flexible approach. And Lao Tzu says, when you are able to be flexible, to be pliant, you can keep to your original goal or getting to a destination by changing your approach. And you are able to also keep your reasoning and conclusion straight, meaning correct, but then get people to your side, winning them over through harmony. And this allows you to maintain your values, your beliefs, your integrity. No compromise necessary. Then there's the humble heart. And previously, we talked about the misconception to lower oneself is not being lowly. It is the Tao of humility. Indeed, we talked about how the higher one wishes to go, the lower one must be. The common misconception associates humility with humiliation. That is not correct. The Tao of humility comes from the true courage of compassion. What we talked about today, less and more. 2 parts, less is more. Simplify your life to maximize joy. When you decrease in one aspect of life, you get an increase in another aspect. Having less just means you're able to receive more goodness. On the other hand, having too much leads to negative effects. So more is less. Too many choices lead to paralysis. We did not get a chance to talk about this last time. I'm glad we were able to cover it today. Then, part 2 of our summary, all about the oneness of the Tao. This is connecting to and continuing from the previous chapter. As I mentioned in the previous chapter, Lao Tzu writes, how do I know the nature of the source? With this. And now, today, we have explored the oneness, that is this. And we did it together, which is the unity of the mind. All of us in this space and time with our focus on the Tao. This is unity that is uniquely our own. Number 3, the unified purpose. As I said, the Tao sages, the Tao cultivators, they are unified, that they share the Tao in order to pass it on. And the scope of that now includes you and me as well. We talked about the central void. This is the essential emptiness that enables everything. The metaphor for that is the empty hub of a wheel where 30 spokes of the wheel come together. So there are many things that come together with us as the central hub in our lives. If we have the emptiness of the Tao within, we also enable the wheel of life to turn. the one key in life. So this is important because it is the most crucial element for you in this lifetime and also the most crucial element in this moment. What I mean by this is like when you and I hear the question, sometimes people ask, what is the point of it all? The point is that one key. So finding that one key allows you to live a life that is full of meaning, whereas the person who's asking, what's the point of it all, is devoid of meaning. Lastly, we talked about the singular source of creation. That is, the point of origin that everything traces back to. And just by reasoning, just by using our human minds, we can reason that such an origin, such a source, must exist. Lacking a better name for it, we are forced to call it Tao. And now, share the Tao. The easiest way to access Tao resources is to visit my author website, DerekLin.com. There, you can click on links and go to the webpage where you will find everything listed, such as Taoism.net, with information about the Tao and also about this meeting. Our Facebook community, where you can ask questions or discuss your thoughts on the Tao with others. Our YouTube channel, where you can watch recordings of all our previous meetings. My Amazon author page, where you can find books and audiobooks for your continuing exploration. You can also go directly with the Tao address, DerekLin.com/links, as you can see. You can use these resources to share the Tao with the people you know who may be interested. When you see the benefits of Tao cultivation in your life, you can share your experience with others through your comments in Facebook or YouTube. If you find my books or audiobooks to be helpful, you can post your reviews on Amazon to help others discover the Tao. This is the path that I am on, so I can say sharing the Tao has benefited me personally in every aspect of life. I would like to invite you to come along with me to share the Tao. Let us travel together on the path in the journey of life. Our meeting has come to an end, but the journey continues on. Until next time, may the Tao fill you with peace and happiness.